Shay finally lands a job at her dream architectural firm. To celebrate, her naughty friends drag her to a wild London nightclub, where one too many drinks lead to a private jet to Vegas with a dangerously charming billionaire. Wait, what? A private jet to Vegas? Stick with Dark Voices to find out how this night spirals out of control. She wakes up with a pounding hangover, a diamond ring on her finger, and the shocking truth that the stranger she married is her new boss. Want to know what happens next? Grab some popcorn and dive into One Night in Vegas with Dark Voices. The older man sitting across the desk looked at her with quiet expectation. Miss Hart? Shayla blinked and lifted her gaze to meet his, momentarily startled. The man had graying hair streaked with darker tones, and his eyes were a startling cool green. For an older gentleman, he was undeniably handsome, the stubble of his graying beard adding to his distinguished appearance. A true silver fox. She shifted in her seat and crossed her legs, sitting upright in an attempt to appear confident and accomplished. I believe my greatest quality is that I'm headstrong, she said confidently, maintaining eye contact. Some may see it as a flaw, but it means I never give up, no matter how difficult the task. Once I set my mind to something, I won't stop until I achieve it. The man nodded slowly, holding her gaze before leaning forward, a faint smile touching his lips. I like that answer. Everyone else today claimed to be confident, ambitious, and trustworthy. He leaned back, dropped his pen on the desk, and added, I like you, Miss Hart. Can you start on Monday? Shayla fought the urge to squeal. Pressing her lips together, she managed a polite smile. Yes, sir. Excellent. Come in Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp. Heather will show you around and get you set up on the system, he said, standing and offering his hand. Shayla rose, taking it with a gentle squeeze. Thank you so much, Mr. Holt. I truly appreciate the opportunity. She picked up her handbag as he escorted her to the glass office door. Welcome to the team, Miss Hart, he said. Shayla smiled and thanked him again before stepping out. As soon as she exited his office, she exhaled deeply. She got the job as executive assistant to the CEO of one of the most prestigious architectural firms in the world. It might not be her dream role yet, but she would work hard, learn everything she could, finish her degree, and one day prove she had the talent and skill to become an architect. After months of struggle, things were finally starting to look up. Dropping out of university had been devastating, but she couldn't afford tuition while also supporting her mother and brother. Since their father's tragic death in a car accident 11 years ago, just after her 16th birthday, Shayla had taken on the role of provider. Her older brother, Sam, battled ADHD and anger management issues. He tried to work, but his inability to concentrate made long-term employment difficult. Their mother hadn't left the house since their father's passing. He had been the love of her life, and when they lost him, they lost a part of her, too. She had become a recluse, unable to face the world. But now Shayla had hope. Life was finally beginning to ease. She raced up the stairs to the London apartment she shared with her two best friends, Joe Sinclair and Amy O'Connor, her lifelines. As she slid the key into the lock, the door burst open. Both girls stood in front of her, messy buns on their heads, oversized sweatshirts hanging loosely, eyes wide with anticipation. Well, they asked in unison. What? Shayla replied, feigning innocence. They stared at her, unconvinced. With the number of missed calls and texts she had received from them, she knew they were desperate for news. How did the interview go? Amy asked, chewing on a mouthful of cereal. It went well, Shayla answered, trying to step inside, but both girls blocked her way. More, Joe demanded, narrowing her honey-colored eyes in scrutiny. Shayla shrugged. He seemed interested, but there were a lot of other candidates with more experience. Their faces fell in unison, and Shayla struggled not to grin. Well, it's their loss. You're amazing, Joe declared, wrapping an arm around her and guiding her into the apartment. Their cozy flat had 3 decently sized bedrooms, an open-plan lounge, a modest kitchen, and a spacious bathroom with a walk-in shower. It wasn't glamorous, but it was close to everything, and she loved living with her girls. If I didn't get this job, I would have had to move back in with my mother and Sam, Shayla admitted, taking off her jacket and tossing it onto the sofa. "Don't say that. Something will come," Amy said. "Wait, did you say won't have to?" Amy asked, her cereal bowl forgotten. Shayla smiled. "You got it. You got the job," they shouted, and before she could respond, they both launched themselves at her. The three of them collapsed in a tangled heap of laughter on the sofa. "I got the job. You're stuck with me." Shayla laughed as they tickled her sides, tears of joy running down her cheeks. Joe jumped up. "We're going out tonight to celebrate. No excuses." She darted toward her room, her socked feet sliding across the wooden floor with Amy close behind. Shayla remained on the sofa, staring at the ceiling. The knot in her stomach that had lingered for months finally loosened. "Get up! We're celebrating!" Joe shouted from her room. Laughing, Shayla stood and found Amy stepping out of her room. They both looked at the bathroom door, then at each other, and ran for it. Shayla nudged Amy out of the way with her hip, sliding into the bathroom and closing the door just in time. "Every single time," Amy exclaimed from the other side. "I do have longer legs," Shayla teased, stripping down for the shower. "And I resent you for it. Don't forget to shave." "You never know what tonight might bring," Amy giggled. "I'm good, thank you very much," Shayla called out, smiling as she stepped into the warm spray. Later that evening, dressed and buzzed from several bottles of Prosecco, the girls arrived at Lux, a bar in central London. Shayla wore a red mini dress that hugged her curves. Amy sparkled in a silver sequin dress, and Joe stunned in a strapless white bodycon number. The music pulsed through the room, the bass vibrating in Shayla's chest as they made their way to the bar. They downed a round of tequila shots, followed by several more rounds of pornstar martinis. Joe had kept her promise. They were well on their way to being tipsy. But hold on, what happens when Shayla locks eyes with a mysterious stranger across the room? Stay tuned with Dark Voices for the moment that changes everything. While dancing with Joe, Shayla's eyes met a pair of vivid green ones across the room. The man was striking, easily the most handsome man she had ever seen. He held a glass of amber liquid, eyes locked on hers, despite the beautiful blonde whispering into his ear beside him. His gaze didn't waver, and Shayla quickly looked away, turning back to dance. Amy returned with a round of green apple shots. "Drink up," she said. They clinked glasses and tossed them back. Despacito thundered through the speakers as Joe leaned in to whisper something in Shayla's ear, sending her into laughter. She backed into something or someone warm and firm. Joe's eyes widened. Then she smiled knowingly and stepped back, leaving Shayla to face whoever had just stepped into her space. "Dance with me," a deep voice purred near Shayla's ear. She turned and found herself staring into the face of the man who had been watching her earlier from the VIP section. Up close, he was even more breathtaking. His eyes were a brilliant green, clever, and curious, glimmering like forest jewels. Their brightness reminded her of summer. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with light brown hair styled neatly, shorter on the sides and longer on top. Her fingers itched to touch it, just to see if it felt as soft as it looked. His features were strong, sharply defined, and utterly masculine. Was that a demand or a request? Shayla asked, narrowing her eyes at him. His full lips curved into a confident smirk as he leaned in, his voice smooth. "Whichever one gets you to say yes," he replied. Someone attempted to squeeze by behind him, prompting him to step even closer. Shayla smiled up at him as his arm slid naturally around her waist, drawing her into him. They began to sway together to the rhythm of the music, perfectly in sync. He could dance. She appreciated that. His movements were fluid, matched to hers effortlessly. He lowered his head, his lips brushing the shell of her ear as he spoke. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Shayla." "Yours," she responded. For a fleeting second, surprise flickered across his face before he smiled, revealing 2 deep dimples that made her heart flutter. "Cole." The way he said his name, paired with that grin, left her nearly breathless. He squinted slightly, his eyes scanning her face as they continued to dance. The music, the crowd, it all faded away. It felt like it was just the two of them. Their bodies moved closer, his hands caressing and exploring with a gentle confidence that made Shayla's pulse race. "Hungry?" he asked. Shayla laughed and nodded, "Starving." Cole reached up and tucked a strand of damp hair behind her ear with a tenderness that surprised her. "How about we go grab something to eat?" he offered. Without hesitation, she nodded. Taking her hand in his, he led her through the crowd. On the way out, she caught Joe's eye and gestured she was leaving. Joe, clearly more tipsy than she was, gave a gleeful thumbs up. Outside, the cool night air hit Shayla like a wave, making her head spin. Cole wrapped his arm around her waist to steady her as they made their way toward a sleek silver Rolls-Royce Phantom. The driver, an older gentleman, stepped out and opened the door. Cole gently guided her inside, his hand resting on the small of her back. Shayla sank into the plush white leather, exhaling with a giggle. "This car is bigger than my entire apartment." Cole chuckled and poured 2 glasses of champagne. "How do you feel about sushi?" "I know a great place." "Sushi?" Shayla wrinkled her nose. "Who eats sushi while tipsy?" "I mean, I like it, just not when I can barely walk straight." He laughed, clearly amused. "Don't get me wrong, I enjoy sushi, but I'm not exactly the type who drinks Cristal and nibbles on fish eggs after a night out," she said. Then she leaned forward and tapped the driver on the shoulder. "Take us to Old Street, please," she requested. "Yes, ma'am," the driver replied with a polite nod. "Ma'am," Shayla giggled. "What am I, 50? Cole grinned and turned to face her fully. "What's in Old Street?" "The best food ever," she said playfully. "No offense, but you strike me as the kind of guy who thinks a fun night involves sipping expensive champagne and eating tiny portions of gourmet food. I'm going to show you a night to remember, Mr. Cole." Cole laughed again, his green eyes bright with amusement. "Oh, and will you be sitting beside me in that rocking chair when we're both 80? "That depends," she whispered as he ran a hand through her hair. "On what?" he asked softly, his gaze falling to her lips. "You'll have to marry me to find out," she teased. He laughed, then leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was slow, warm, and deliberate. Shayla felt her head spin again, this time not from the champagne. His tongue brushed gently along her bottom lip, asking for more, and she gladly responded, deepening the kiss. If kisses could melt the mind, this one had done it. The car ride blurred as they continued kissing until the driver eventually announced their arrival. Shayla pulled Cole toward the entrance of a cozy place called the Breakfast Bar. "What is this?" Cole asked, amused. "You haven't lived until you've had their pancakes," Shayla replied as they took a seat. He began to look at the menu, but she plucked it from his hands. "You don't need that," she said with a knowing smile. "To share the stack of pancakes and 2 salted caramel lattes, please," she told the server, who smiled and walked off. 20 minutes later, Cole was leaning back in his chair, licking his fork clean and groaning with delight. "That was incredible," he said. "I told you," Shayla replied proudly, savoring her final bite and licking the cream off her finger. Cole reached across the table and gently took her hand, his thumb brushing along her knuckles. "You're completely different from anyone I've ever met. I don't remember the last time I had this much fun with someone new." Shayla blushed and looked down at her coffee, her heart fluttering. The rest of the night became a blur. After a few more drinks and a round of shots, they somehow ended up on a private jet. Shayla laughed uncontrollably as she stepped out onto a quiet runway. "Vegas, baby," she declared, raising her arms dramatically and nearly losing her balance. She looked around, confused. "Wait, there's no chapel here." Cole laughed, then wrapped his arm around her from behind and kissed her cheek. "We can't land in the middle of the strip," he said, voice husky. "We have to drive." Shayla giggled. "All right then, driver, take us to Elvis." They climbed into a black limo and headed off. Shayla vaguely remembered bright lights, a casino, more cocktails, and at some point, Cole carrying her out of a chapel as they kissed like reckless teenagers. The next morning, harsh sunlight streamed into the room. Shayla stirred, groaning as she turned her face into a soft pillow. "Mo soft," she murmured, snuggling deeper until something struck her. She didn't own soft pillows. Hers were old and lumpy. Opening her eyes with difficulty, her head pounding, she blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling above her. Panic began to rise. She sat up slowly, realizing she was in a strange bed, and she was completely naked. Clutching the sheet around her, she froze when something hard brushed against her nose. Looking down, her breath caught at the sight of a massive diamond ring on her finger. She scrambled out of the bed, the sheet wrapped tightly around her, eyes darting over the scattered clothing strewn across the room. "Oh no, where? Where am I?" she muttered. She spotted a black shirt on the floor, then turned toward the window. Pulling back the curtain, she shielded her eyes from the morning glare. "This isn't London. Good morning." She jumped and spun around. A tall, handsome man stood behind her, wearing only designer boxers. "You're finally up," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Oh goodness," she whispered, stunned. Cole winced, rubbing his temples. "Actually, it's just Cole," he replied with a smirk, clearly feeling just as rough. "Cole, where are we?" He looked around and gave her a lazy smile. "Vegas, I believe. Let's rewind back to when Cole woke up a few minutes earlier." "Oh, sweet mercy." Cole stirred from his peaceful sleep, his head pounding as the scent of coconut and passion fruit teased his senses. He shifted onto his side but paused when he felt a distinct weight on his chest. Squinting against the sunlight streaming into the room, he opened his eyes and glanced down. A head of silky brown hair rested against his chest, and the source of that intoxicating scent became clear. He tilted his head and studied the girl lying partially on top of him. She was attractive. Soft pink lips, long lashes, perfectly shaped brows. Certainly not the worst surprise to wake up to. But who was she? He gently peeled her arm from his chest and dead-angled their legs, causing her to murmur and shift with a sigh as he rolled her off him. She snuggled deeper into the pillows while he sat up and surveyed her form. Her bare back was exposed beneath the sheets. Her long, dark hair fanned out across the bed. She looked peaceful and completely unfamiliar. Cole frowned. He had no memory of last night. Nothing. Total blank. He looked around the luxurious room, noting clothes scattered across the gleaming marble floor. Where on earth were they? He slid on his boxers and walked to the window. The skyline hit him immediately. The neon glint of distant casinos and the unmistakable landscape confirmed it. He was in Las Vegas. Cole rubbed his face and groaned. He picked up his jeans and rummaged through the pockets, hoping to find some clue to explain the situation. His fingers closed around something folded and damp. He pulled it out along with his passport. It was a piece of paper. No, a certificate. A marriage certificate. Cole stared blankly at the heading, his pulse beginning to race. Marriage of Tristan Cole Holt and Shayla Hart. He looked down at his hand and noticed the gold wedding band wrapped snugly around his finger. Glancing toward the bed, he saw a matching diamond ring glittering on Shayla's hand. They were married. He had flown to Vegas and married a girl he barely remembered. Cole grabbed his phone and stepped out of the bedroom to make a call. "Mr. Holt," came his lawyer, Frank's groggy voice on the other end. "Is everything all right?" "Sorry to wake you," Cole began quickly. "Is a marriage in Vegas legally binding? Do you have a certificate?" Frank asked. Cole snapped a picture and sent it over. "Just sent it." There was a pause, followed by shuffling on the other end of the line. "Well, yes," Frank confirmed. "That's a formal document. It's legal." Cole's heart sank. He stared at the paper in his hand in disbelief. "I can't remember anything past leaving the club. Please tell me there's a loophole. We may be able to annul it based on intoxication. I'll start the paperwork." "Thanks. Keep me updated," Cole said before ending the call. He paced the room, his thoughts swirling. How could he have done something so reckless? He wasn't the type to lose control. His life was usually strict and calculated: work, goals, and when he did unwind, it was with a quiet drink and a casual companion, not this, blacking out and waking up married to a stranger. It was completely out of character. He turned when he heard soft footsteps. Shayla wandered into the dining area, wrapped in a sheet, her expression a mixture of confusion and horror. She paused, taking in her surroundings, trying to make sense of everything. Cole noticed her eyes first, darker than his, and olive green framed by naturally long lashes. He leaned against the doorframe, coffee in hand. "Good morning," he greeted. Shayla jumped and let out a small squeak, whirling around to face him. Her eyes scanned his bare torso, then met his gaze. "You're finally awake." "Who are you?" she asked, pressing herself up against the window. "I'm Cole," he replied, stepping forward. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself and avoided his eyes. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice cautious. "Vegas, I believe." Her expression froze, her eyes widened, unblinking. "Vegas," she repeated slowly. Cole nodded. "That's what it looks like." Shayla shook her head, clearly overwhelmed. "What are we doing in Vegas?" He shrugged. "No clue. I don't remember anything after leaving the club with a girl. That's it. The rest is a blank. Do you remember anything?" Shayla blinked, clearly struggling to piece together the night. "Nothing at all. I was incredibly tipsy. I don't even remember meeting you." She rubbed her temple. "And why am I wearing a ring?" Cole rubbed the back of his neck and lifted his hand, revealing the gold band. Her eyes dropped to her own ring, and she paled. "No, no, no. Tell me we didn't. Did we really get married?" Cole nodded grimly. Her face drained of color. "How? How did we go from a club in London to this?" Cole groaned and rubbed his forehead. "Could you keep your voice down? I feel like my brain might fall out." He sighed. "I honestly don't know. I didn't plan to end up married to a complete stranger either." Shayla folded her arms and narrowed her eyes. "Well, thank goodness you didn't plan it. Imagine what would have happened if you had. And for the record, you're not exactly my type." That one stung. Cole raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's interesting because I certainly seemed like your type last night." Her eyes narrowed further, and she stepped toward him, clearly ready to fire back. "Wait, you said you didn't remember anything?" Shayla accused, pointing a finger right at Cole's face. Cole raised an eyebrow at her finger, then looked back at her and rolled his eyes. "I don't. But when I woke up this morning, the state of the room painted a pretty clear picture," he replied, taking a step closer. Shayla instinctively tilted her head up to maintain eye contact. "There was a trail of clothing from the front door to the bed," he continued matter-of-factly, "which means we were far too preoccupied to care about who was whose type." He smirked. "Not to mention, you're definitely wearing my signature completely exhausted look." Shayla's green eyes widened in disbelief. She exhaled sharply and took a big step back, frustration evident as she ran her hands through her hair. "I'm not even going to dignify that with a response," she said through gritted teeth. She paused, pacing slightly before turning to face him again. "What are we going to do? Is this marriage even legal?" "I'm afraid so," Cole said with a sigh. Her shoulders slumped, and she shook her head. "How? How could they marry us while we were clearly intoxicated? Doesn't Vegas require a marriage license or something?" "That's the magic of this city," Cole replied, setting his coffee mug down and retrieving the folded document from the table. "Anything can happen in Vegas. I found this in my pocket this morning." He handed her the damp paper. "What is this?" "Our marriage certificate, signed by both of us, albeit sloppily," he said. She stared down at it, unfolding it slowly and reading it in silence. Then she leaned against the dining table, her face pale. "Oh my goodness, we're actually married." Cole rubbed the back of his neck. She looked genuinely distressed, her eyes cast to the floor. He didn't handle upset people well. It always made him feel awkward and out of place. "Hey, look," he said gently, "it's not the end of the world. I'm sure we're not the first couple to do something impulsive in Vegas. We'll get an annulment, move on, and treat it like it never happened." Shayla looked up at him, and for a moment, something in her eyes gave him pause, sadness, maybe, or just the disorientation of it all. But she eventually nodded. "Yeah, I suppose you're right," she murmured, glancing around the penthouse, then scratching her head. I can't find my dress." Cole's eyes scanned the room. "Don't worry, I've arranged for clothes to be delivered for both of us. You look about a size 10. She blinked at him. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that. Just let me know what I owe you, and I'll pay you back." He handed her a mug of black coffee and smiled. "Don't worry about it." Shayla took a long sip, closing her eyes and exhaling as the caffeine soothed her hangover. Cole watched her for a moment, captivated. When she looked up and caught his gaze, he quickly looked away and shrugged. "I figured you'd want to freshen up. I didn't order breakfast since I wasn't sure what you'd like." "Go ahead and order room service if you're hungry," he offered, disappearing into the bathroom. After a long, much-needed shower and several business calls, Cole joined Shayla for breakfast. They sat quietly, letting the food soak up the lingering effects of the night before. The avocado toast helped ease the queasiness in his stomach. When Shayla reappeared, she was dressed in the outfit he had arranged, light blue fitted jeans and a simple low-cut black tee. She looked fresh and composed. They left the hotel and climbed into a sleek black car that took them to the airport. As they approached Cole's private jet, Shayla stepped out of the car and stared up at the plane. "Whoa, this is yours?" she asked. "Sure is, sweetheart," he replied with a grin, gesturing for her to board. Cole couldn't wait to get home. He felt drained physically and mentally. As he settled into his seat, he noticed Shayla lingering near the aisle. "You planning to stand the whole flight?" he teased. "I won't bite unless requested." Shayla shook her head, murmured something under her breath, and slid into the seat next to him. She stared out the window, fingers twisting nervously in her lap, biting her lower lip. Cole found himself curious. She was different, unlike the women he usually met. This was also the longest he had ever spent with someone he'd been physically involved with. Typically, he left right after things ended. No attachments, no complications. His work was demanding, and his last relationship had ended badly a year ago. Since then, he had thrown himself into his career, staying far away from emotional entanglements. At some point during the flight, Cole must have dozed off with a book in hand. He stirred when the captain's voice came over the intercom. Shayla had fallen asleep on his shoulder, her arm loosely draped around his. The scent of her shampoo filled his senses again, and he smiled as he brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. She was beautiful, even without makeup. As the plane touched down on the runway, the jolt woke her. Shayla blinked slowly, then looked up at him. Realizing where her head had been resting, she sat up quickly and smoothed her hair, flustered. "How long was I asleep?" "A couple of hours," Cole replied casually. She frowned and leaned down to pull on her shoes. "I'm so sorry. You should have woken me." "No need. I was out, too," he assured her. They walked together to the car waiting by the tarmac. Shayla rubbed her neck and let out a groan. "It's been a wild weekend." "I've got work in the morning," she mumbled. As they reached the vehicle, she paused, eyeing it with recognition. "Did we take this car last night?" she asked. Cole nodded. She blinked again. "I remember the car and him." She pointed toward the driver, Gerald, who smiled politely and opened the door. "Evening, miss," he greeted. Shayla gave him a skeptical glance but climbed in. About an hour later, they arrived at her building. Shayla stepped out, and Cole followed, walking around the car to face her. "Well, this is me," she said, glancing at the building behind her. "Thanks for getting me home." "No problem." He reached into his pocket and handed her a card. "My lawyer's already drawing up the annulment papers. We'll meet in a few days." "You can sign them then." Shayla accepted the card, examining it. Tristan? I thought your name was Cole. It is. I go by Cole outside of work, he said with a faint smile. She nodded and tucked the card into her pocket. It was clear she had no idea who he really was. Something that felt oddly refreshing. Well, I guess I'll wait to hear from you. I'll text you my number, she added. They stood awkwardly, unsure of how to end the encounter. Shayla turned to leave but paused, then removed the ring from her finger and handed it to him. We've never met before, right? She asked, studying his face. Cole shook his head, smirking. I don't think so. I would have remembered meeting you. Her cheeks flushed slightly as she blinked up at him. She cleared her throat. Thanks again, he smiled. Thank you for an eventful weekend, Shayla Hart. Shayla gave a quick nod, mumbled a goodbye, and turned toward the building. I guess I'll see you in a few days. Wifey, Cole called out. She stopped in her tracks, turned, and glared at him with narrowed eyes. Don't call me that. Cole laughed softly as he watched her disappear into the building. It had been one unforgettable 42 hours. Shayla jolted awake to the chirping of her alarm on the bedside table. Eyes still closed, she fumbled for her phone and hit snooze. Sweet silence returned. For only a moment, her eyes snapped open as realization hit. It was her first day at the new job. She launched out of bed, glancing at the time, 7:45 a.m. She had to be there by 9. Still doable. Dragging herself to the bathroom, Shayla stepped into a hot shower and tried to scrub away the remnants of the most chaotic weekend of her life. As she brushed her teeth, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were bloodshot, her skin pale, like something out of a horror movie. After 2 mugs of strong coffee, she felt mildly human again. Convincing herself the butterflies in her stomach were excitement, not nerves, she moved to apply her makeup. Just as she finished her eyeshadow, her bedroom door burst open. Joe stormed in, Amy hot on her heels. Where in the 7 kingdoms of chaos have you been? Joe shrieked, hair tousled, eyes wide. We were worried sick, Amy added, scolding her. Shayla jumped, smudging mascara across her eyelid. She groaned. Seriously, you scared the life out of me. Look what you did to my mascara. Forget the mascara, Joe snapped. Where have you been all weekend? We thought you brought that hot guy back to the flat, but then you never came home. Your phone was off, and we imagined all sorts of worst-case scenarios, Amy added, plopping onto the bed. Shayla narrowed her eyes. And whose fault is that exactly? You two let me leave with a complete stranger. You two looked totally into each other, Amy shrugged. We thought you just went for a little romantic escape. Speaking of, she added with a smirk. How was the escape? Must have been something if you stayed away all weekend. Shayla sighed and threw a brush at her, which Amy dodged with a laugh. I wasn't gone because of that. I was in Vegas. Vegas, they said in unison. Yes, Las Vegas, as in Nevada, Shayla said, pulling on a lacy black top. I was so out of it, I ended up on a private jet flying across the Atlantic. With that guy? Joe asked, stunned. Yes, with that guy, Shayla said, exasperated. But that's not even the craziest part. We got married. Silence. Both girls stared at her, speechless. You got married? Joe finally managed. Shayla nodded, casually applying her lipstick. To him, by Elvis, legally. Amy gasped. Wait. So, let me get this straight. You met a ridiculously handsome guy in a club. He flew you to Vegas in a private jet, and you married him? Shayla nodded again. Please tell me you at least, Amy. Shayla exclaimed and hurled a bottle of perfume at her friend, who collapsed onto the bed in a fit of giggles. Joe leaned forward, suddenly serious. Who is this guy? Shayla shrugged and pulled a business card from her purse. All I know is his name. Tristan Cole something. Joe took the card, and her eyes widened in disbelief. Oh my goodness, Shayla. Amy grabbed the card. I knew he looked familiar, she exclaimed. Do you know who this man is? Shayla frowned. No. Should I? Both girls shouted in unison, yes. He's Tristan Cole Holt, Shayla, Joe said, nearly breathless. He's one of the most renowned architects in the world. He's a billionaire CEO. He's constantly in Architectural Digest in Forbes and, well, everywhere. Amy thrust her phone toward Shayla. This is him, right? Shayla blinked at the photo and nodded slowly. Yeah, that's him. Amy squealed. Not only did you meet him, you married him. Shayla, you lucky miracle of a person. I can't even deal with this right now. Shayla muttered, grabbing her jacket. I'm going to be late. You don't need a job anymore. You're rich now, Amy sang, bouncing on the bed. Get off my bed, woman, Shayla grunted, pulling Amy's leg until she toppled off with a yelp. Ow, my back. I've got to go. Make my bed, Shayla called as she tossed a pillow and hurried to the door. Yes, Mrs. Holt, Amy called after her with a laugh. Shayla responded with a playful glare and a not-so-subtle hand gesture, but deep down, she couldn't even process it all. Her head was spinning, and she was probably still a little hungover. Right now, she had to focus on her career. Becoming an architect was still her dream, ring or no ring. Shayla arrived at work with 5 minutes to spare, heart pounding. She wasn't even sure how she made it without breaking the sound barrier. Shayla, called a voice. She turned and saw Heather, the woman who had greeted her during her interview. I'm Heather. If you're ready, I'll show you around, and then we can review Mr. Holt's schedule. Shayla nodded, pulling herself together. They walked through the sleek, open-concept office. High-tech cubicles, massive monitors, and design tablets filled the space. Shayla's eyes lit up. This is your desk, Heather explained. And of course, you already know where Mr. Holt's office is. Shayla nodded, still smiling. Heather continued with a practiced tone. Now, Mr. Holt is very particular. Coffee, black, with skimmed milk on the side, must be ready on his desk by 7:45. He has a sesame bagel with smoked salmon and fat-free cream cheese at 8 a.m. every morning without fail. Got it, Shayla said with a polite smile. He also works around the clock, so he's often tired and grumpy. If you see him loosening his tie or rubbing his temples, that's your signal to steer clear unless he specifically asks for you. And if he does, don't speak. Just nod. Always knock before entering his office and wait for his gesture to enter. Understood? Shayla glanced nervously toward the closed office and nodded again. Got it. Well, Heather said upbeat, I'm sure you'll both get along just fine. He's just finishing up a meeting, and then we'll introduce you. Shayla followed her to the kitchen area, sipping a caramel latte and watching the office life unfold around her. It was impressive, the kind of place she had dreamed of working at since college. Heather bounced back moments later. He's ready now. Come on. Shayla followed her toward the CEO's office, assuming this would be a routine introduction, even if she'd already met him during the interview. They stepped into the office. Shayla's eyes wandered briefly to the artwork on the wall before she heard her name. Mr. Holt, this is your new executive assistant, Shayla. Shayla turned toward the desk, and her breath caught. Their eyes met first. Her heart dropped. You, she whispered. You, Cole said calmly. Shayla blinked, looking between Heather and the tall man standing behind the desk. Boss was an older guy. Cole nodded calmly. You must have met my father, Tony Holt. He was conducting interviews while I was out of town. Shayla stared at him, stunned. So, you're my boss? Looks that way, Cole said, adjusting his cufflinks, his brows furrowed in concentration. Heather glanced between the two of them, clearly caught off guard. You've already met? Heather asked. Cole cut in smoothly, his gaze locked on Shayla. Would you give us a moment? Heather nodded quickly and scurried out. Shayla spun in place, pacing in front of his desk. This has to be a joke, she muttered. This can't be real. Cole rubbed the back of his neck, watching her quietly as she moved in frantic circles, mumbling under her breath. Shayla, why don't we sit down, he suggested gently. I can't sit, she replied sharply, running her